why is it that we do what we do? I mean, why would we gather on a morning like this, and maybe even risk, rain? Why would we invest valuable resources in creating space in this community that we're talking about creating? What is the compelling why that would keep us driving in this direction? And of course, if you've been around here very long at all, you know that the compelling why is Jesus, and specifically the good news or the gospel about what he has done for us, and the hope that we have. And in particular, it's his love which compels him and thereby compels us. His love for those that he has created. I want to read for you from writings of the Apostle Paul, probably the earliest portion of the New Testament that was written. The Apostle Paul was writing to a young church that had started just within a couple of years in the city of Corinth, in modern sort of Mesopotamia. And he's quoting something that he says was actually historic to him. So it predated even his coming to faith in Jesus. So we're talking about like the earliest sort of writings and thinking of the early church, recorded for us in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 1. And here's what the Apostle Paul wrote. He says, "Brothers and sisters, I want to call your attention to the good news that I preached to you, which you also received and in which you stand. You are being saved through it, if you hold on to the message I preached to you, unless somehow you believed for nothing. I passed on to you as most important what I also received. Christ died for our sins, in line with the Scriptures. He was buried, and he rose on the third day in line with the Scriptures. He, Christ, appeared to Peter, and then to the 12, and then he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at once. Most of them are still alive this day, though some have died. Then he appeared to James, and then to all the apostles, and then last of all, he appeared to me as if I'd been born at the wrong time. So then, whether you heard the message from me or one of them, this is what we preach, and this is what we have believed." So that good news that he described back in verses 3 and 4 is this. Christ died for our sins. He was buried, and he was raised on the third day. This is why we do what we do. This is why we gather. This is why we build. This is why we want to serve the community in which we live. Jesus died for our sins. Now that's an extraordinary expression of love. I mean, that's a spectacular display of compassion and concern and other-centeredness that Jesus demonstrated. And he invites the church to demonstrate a similar kind of love. To love as he has loved. Now, if someone were to approach you and say, "Look, I want to address the greatest need that you've ever had, like your most substantial need." So let's assume they know you well enough to know what that need is. What would you say in response? I mean, any one of us would say, "Well, yes, thank you." So, if someone came up to me and said, "Look, Terry, I want to give you a 2019 Corvette ZR1. I would say yes. You would too. Now, that's not my greatest need. In fact, it doesn't even crack the top 100. In fact, my greatest need is not a material need. It's not a financial need. I mean, we're talking buildings here, beautiful spaces, but our greatest need is not a financial need. My greatest need is not a social need. I am so grateful for the wonderful friendships that God has given to me. But that's not my greatest need. My greatest need is not a need for romance. It's not a need for career and satisfaction. My greatest need is not a need for success or fame or wealth. My greatest need is actually your greatest need. In fact, it's the greatest need that every human being who has ever lived has had. It's the need to be rescued from my sin. The brokenness that trips me up from the inside out. Maybe you've sensed the presence of that. It's that inability, no matter how hard we try in our own strength, to always get it right. And so sin is that which disturbs my most precious relationships in some way, shape, or form. It's that which has tarnished what should have been my proudest career achievements. Sin is that which twists success into something that actually becomes sour. Sin is that which actually takes fame and can turn it into something that is actually profane. Sin ruins wealth so that once you've got it, all you ever want is more. Jesus died for our sin. Because he loves us, he did it. And he will take your and my brokenness and he will give us his wholeness. And then he'll teach us to live in that wholeness in increasingly real and material ways everywhere we are. In our families, on our street, in our places of work or school, as we serve the local and the greater community in which we live. Jesus did this because he loves us. Paul says Christ died for our sins and he was buried, meaning that he took all of that with him into the grave and left it there. And then Paul goes on and he says, and Christ was raised from the dead on the third day. The resurrection of Jesus is the grand announcement of his success. On the cross, Jesus said, "It is finished." The resurrection proves it. At the very center of the why of Okotoks Alliance Church is Jesus. He loves you. He's loved us. And his love is his compelling why. And because of that, it's become our compelling why. Why we exist. Why we exist at all. So here we are as a church doing what we can with what we have been entrusted with in order to attempt to gather in worship and acknowledge what he has done, his extraordinary love for us. In order to gather that we can then go out and represent that love in little and great ways in the community in which God has placed us. As we gather desiring to hear the words of Jesus. And maybe you hear this and say, that would be good. I could maybe use with listening to the words of Jesus a little bit more. And I'd just like to invite you to come back. I mean, if you're regular with us, of course, and if you're guests among us, absolutely. Because what we're actually going to do this fall is we are going to listen intently to the words of Jesus as they've been recorded for us by his good friend Matthew. The Gospel according to Matthew. And we're going to spend the next few months actually just inviting Jesus to speak to us. And particularly, we're doing a series that we're calling Faith to Face, Walking with Jesus in Okotoks. What would Jesus observe if he were to take your and my hand and we would to introduce him to the people we love, our friends, our neighbors, those we work with? What would he observe about those relationships? And what would he, the one who supremely loves us, want to say into those relationships? So that's a journey we're going to be on over the next while, and would love for you to be a part of that with us. Come every Sunday morning for the next few months and see what Jesus would say to you. That's the invitation. I'm going to invite Tim and the team to come on back up. We're going to sing one more song, kind of in response together here. And then we'll give some instructions concerning how the remainder of our little bit of time here will proceed. How are we doing for time? We're doing great. Jesus' why is his love for you. And that has become our compelling why as a church as well. It's why we gather. It's why we're building. It's why we are in this community. And it's why we would invite you to listen to his words of love for you, that you would discover it and live it out.